is kind of a beer I could chug, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah, I was actually going to say
yeah, it's super drinkable.
Welcome to another episode. I'm John.
I'm Jeff, and today, believe it or not, is Learn to Homebrew Day. Apparently it happens all over the country. People are learning to homebrew. It's the first Saturday of every November, and so what better way to start the holiday than to brew a beer? So today we are brewing a chocolate coconut milk stout. Friggin' mouthful, that's what John said.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited. I got a yeast starter set up last night, and I think this is going to be really awesome. The last time I brewed with coconut, I fell in love with it, so we're ready to take you along for the ride. So John, you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's brew some beer. Alright guys, so here's the ingredients that we're using today. In that giant bag there is a combination of Maris Otter, 2-row pale malt, flaked barley, flaked wheat, chocolate malt, Munich Malt, and roasted barley. Next to it, we're also going to be adding lactose. This is a milk stout. This is my first time using lactose, so kind of excited to try it out. We also got East Kent Golding hops, as well as Magnum hops. We'll be adding that in a boil. We got lots and lots of natural coconut shreddings. We're using half of this today, and then the other half we're going to use in secondary. And then we got some beautiful Cho chocolate. This is from Northern California. I actually tried this at a beer festival, fell in love, and then I found it at Sprout. So I was like, hell yeah, let's add this in. And then believe it or not, my local brew supply place had Cho chocolate cocoa nibs. So we're using that in secondary. And then this guy right here is our yeast starter. This is White Lab's California Ale yeast. I think it's WLP001. So there we go. Let's get the water heated up. Alright guys, so we have our strike water up to 174 degrees. We got it in our mash tun. Now it's time to mash in and pour in the grain. So John's going to go ahead and get started with that. And I'll be stirring to make sure we don't get any doughy clumps or anything like that. Now guys, this is one of my favorite parts of brewing. I just enjoy the aroma of the grains as soon as they hit the hot water. And you kind of get an idea of what color your beer is going to look like. This right now is quite foamy, and it's got kind of like a brown foam to it, so yeah, that's quite exciting. So this is what she looks like, folks. John's stirring it like a champ. Just making sure we don't have any dough balls in there. Getting in nice and deep black. Alright guys, so we are mashing in right now, and it looks like the mash-in temperature is like right around 159, which is a little bit higher than I wanted, but it's not a huge deal. We're gonna let this sit for an hour, and then we're gonna mash out and do some sparging. So while we're waiting for the grains to mash in, right here I have just raw coconut that I'm putting in the oven. This is at 325. I'm gonna let it sit in there for about 15 minutes or so until it gets like a nice roasted brown. Oh my god guys, I wish my camera had smell-o-vision, because this coconut smells amazing. Alright guys, so the mash-in is complete. The next step we have is to clarify the wort. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this pot here, and I'm going to slowly, very lightly turn on this valve to let the wort come through. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a grain bed down here in the bottom of the mash that's going to prevent the grains from getting into our brew kettle. So basically I'm clarifying this right now. So we're just going to turn this very lightly on. Alright, so this pot definitely has quite a few grains in it. So I'm probably going to have to do this cycle a few times. Let me just show you. I doubt I can get it on camera, but it's got a beautiful color to it. just basically now we just got to get it to run clear. So I'm gonna pour this on top. And then basically I'm just gonna start that same cycle again, lightly turning on the valve, draining some of that wort in, and we'll just do this probably 4 or 5 times until the wort's running clear. Alright, so our wort is running clear now. So I am transferring it back into the brew kettle, and now I'm going to heat up some more water to sparge those grains and rinse them of any remaining sugars. And then we start our 60-minute boil. Here we go. So the next step before we start the boil is to sparge our grains. Basically, we're adding some more hot water into the mash tun to ensure that we wash all those grains of as many sugars as possible. We want those sugars because the yeast will convert those sugars into alcohol, and that's the goal anyways, right? So I'm just gonna lightly pour some in here. Some people have some really fancy sparging setups. I'm sure if you Google it, you'll see some really cool stuff. I haven't gotten there yet, but this still pretty much does the trick, so let's go. Sometimes people leave their ball valve closed and they don't let the wort go into the brew kettle at this point. They let the hot water sit on the grains. I'm actually doing what's called a fly sparge. What that is I'm actually leaving the ball valve open just as it was before with our original mash. It's just slowly letting that wort pour into the brew kettle. And I'm doing that one for time. I'm losing daylight. And 2, I find that it's just as effective. I haven't really seen a huge difference in my home brews. So as that sparge fills up the brew kettle, as soon as it's done, we're gonna get it back on the burner and get this thing up to a rolling boil. And that's where the real fun starts. Alright, ladies and gents, we are basically at a rolling boil. Right now I'm just keeping my eye out for the hot break. Sometimes when you reach that full boil, all of a sudden it foams up real fast, and out of nowhere it boils over the kettle, makes a huge sugary mess. It's a pain in the ass. You lose good sugars. It's doing it right now. So what you do to make sure this doesn't boil over is you just turn down the heat. So I'm going to turn it down right now. And see, it prevents it from getting any higher. And it'll still boil there a little bit. Just keep an eye on it. We can turn it back up. You see it building more. It looks like it wants to build some more. We'll turn it back down. Trust me, after making a lot of home brews, boil over is probably the least amount of fun to clean. And if you can avoid it, it makes you feel a lot better about your brew. Yeah, this part's tricky. Basically, it's just a matter of turning the heat up and then back down and then back up and then back down. And eventually that foam will kind of mellow out a little bit, and it'll just have a nice soft rolling boil and you won't have to worry about it. So I'm just going to play with this, and then we're going to start our 60-minute timer. Oh, it looks like, yeah, it looks like hot break's finished. So now you guys can see that foam is receding back down to a normal level, and our beautiful wort is boiling away. So that actually didn't take as long as I thought it would. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and start our 60-minute timer. And as we do that, I'm starting with 0.3 ounces of Magnum hops. I don't want this to be a real bitter beer. This is supposed to be a chocolate coconut milk stout. I want it as sweet as possible and as non-bitter as possible. So 0.3 ounces, that's enough to make sure that this beer stays, you know, sanitary and clean, and it'll last a while. So there we go. And now we start our 60-minute timer. Well guys, we're almost done with the boil. We only got about 20 minutes left. This is where we put in like all of our additions, like everything that's gonna make this what this beer is supposed to be. So the first addition I have here is chocolate. We're adding 5 ounces of Cho chocolate. I had this at the OC Brewers Guild Brewers Mash just like a month ago. Love their chocolate, happened to find it at Sprouts and said, you know what, sounds good to me. So here we go. We're gonna just take the whole damn thing, booyah, chuck it in there. I got one more. So this is a total of 5 ounces of chocolate. I know some of you guys are probably cringing, a lot of you home brewers probably saying, you know, you don't just get any chocolate and chuck it in there, but you know what, I don't care. It's gonna be fun. So, John, go ahead and show them what you got coming up next.
Cool. Alright, so Jeff just added the chocolate, and what I have here actually in a grain bag is gonna be toasted coconut. It is gonna be 1 pound of coconut total. It's going to give us that nice coconut flavor that we're looking for here, and I'm going to go ahead and drop this into the boil.
One of the last additions we have is lactose. Now this is a milk stout. I've never brewed with lactose before. Basically, lactose has got milk sugars that are non-fermentable by yeast. So instead of the yeast eating it and converting it into alcohol, it keeps the beer sweet and creates a nice creamy mouthfeel. So John's gonna pour that in. I'm just gonna stir because I don't want it like to clump up. I don't know what it's gonna do, so I just want to make sure it spreads out evenly.
And so here we go. And we are using 1 pound of lactose here, right?
Yep.
So as Jeff said, this is the first time he's ever brewed with lactose, so we are definitely curious to see how it all works out.
This is a very experimental beer, by the way.
As you could tell.
But that's what makes brewing fun, right? Trying new stuff.
Absolutely.
First thing I notice about the lactose is the fact that it doesn't stick to the bag like dry malt extract does. So it's definitely a different kind of sugar.
Yeah, and it dissolves quite quickly, it looks like.
It dissipated quite fast, so that's nice. Now we got one more step left. I figured this would be a lot of fun. John and I are big fans of Mounds, and the reason why is because it's chocolate and coconut and just delicious. So we're gonna take a little bite and chuck it in there, make it part of the beer.
Cheers,
buddy. Bloop. Well, we are reaching the end of the boil. We only have about 10 minutes left, so I'm adding the final hop addition. This is UK East Kent Goldings. It is 1 ounce. I'm adding this really late because it's going to be less bitterness and more of those like earthy, floral, grass, dirt kind of tones. I feel like it's going to mix really well with everything else we have, and maybe soften up some of the I don't want it to be over sweet, so maybe this will kind of mellow it out a little bit. So here we go, 1 ounce. And then also, don't forget, we got to chill this sucker down. So I got my handy dandy wort chiller here. We're gonna put it into the brew kettle. And the reason why is because in the next 10-15 minutes, it's actually gonna be sanitized. So we don't have to worry about it causing any issues with the beer itself. So, all right, so at this point, we are cooling down the wort with this wort chiller. Basically what we're doing is we are running cold water from my sink to one end of the hose. The copper coils cover the surface area of the wort inside, and on the other end, that hot water that collects comes out, and actually right now I have it to sanitize my fermentation bucket. So we're going to be doing this for a little while. Obviously at some point I'm going to pull this hose out and just put it back in the sink, but we're going to sanitize everything, so by the time it comes to putting it in the fermenter, everything's ready to go. Alright guys, we have finally cooled the wort down to about 70 degrees. We're now transferring the wort from the brew kettle into a fermenter, and this is where we're going to pitch the yeast, and this is where it's going to turn into beer. So I'm just going to use what's called a siphon hose to move the wort from the brew kettle to the to the fermenter. So here we go. So there it is, guys. That is our first look. So this is going to fill up. We're going to check the gravity. We are going to pitch the yeast, and then we're going to let this sit for a few days. Alright, so the wort is filled just above the 5 gallon line. It looks like maybe 5 1/4, 5 1/2-ish, which is good for me because when I keg this, by the time it's all done with everything and all the coconut and chocolate and all that stuff has absorbed some of this liquid, should be right at 5 gallons. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to oxidize this by just stirring the spoon around and basically exposing oxygen to the wort. Now this is the only time during the brew process that you actually want to do this, and basically all it does is enhance aroma and flavors. Any other time after that yeast is pitched, it can actually harm the then beer and create off flavors. But anyways, I'm going to do this right now. Nothing fancy, just stirring it up. Alright, so now comes my favorite part of the brew process, and that is adding the yeast. Now, I actually made this yeast starter last night around the same time as it is now. And basically all I did is I used White Lab's WLP001, that's a California Ale yeast, and I poured it into this beaker, which had some dry malt extract and water mixed with it, so basically like a little sample of wort. And so over the last day or so, the yeast has been able to eat those sugars, and basically it's all woken up and fully functional. It's kind of like sending your yeast into hyperdrive. So we're going to pour this in there, and hopefully we have a very vigorous fermentation, and this yeast is extremely happy with what we are providing for it. So here we go. Just going to take this top off. Get a little whiff, smells amazing. And in the yeast goes. So, for those of you who don't know, yeast is a main component for beer, at least for me. Without yeast, you can't have beer. The yeast eats the sugars that we've provided in the grains, converts it into two things, CO2 and alcohol. The CO2 is expelled out of the airlock that I'm going to put on in a minute. The alcohol stays in the liquid. That's how you have beer. So I'm going to put the top on, and then we're ready to start fermentation. Alright, so we finished brew day. John and I, spent all day slaving over this, but it was totally worth it. We rendered about 5.5 gallons of wort. Actually, technically now it's beer. There's yeast in there doing its work. We did pull some of the wort off beforehand, to measure the gravity. I figured we'd keep it and give it a taste. Kind of curious how much coconut came out of it. So I'm going to take a taste and I'll give it to John.
And so most of the work done today was done by the brewmaster here, Jeff. But the color of it looks amazing.
Yeah.
The house has been smelling amazing.
Incredible.
Very interested to see how fermentation goes and what the smells are going to be like as they come out. So, what do you think?
I mean, it's really sweet and sugary. I'm actually not getting a ton of coconut. I'm very, very surprised. All the advice I got said add the coconut with like 15 minutes left in the boil. I added it at 20. Still not a ton, but wort has nothing to do with how the actual beer is going to turn out. Right. Really, it just tastes like sugar.
Yep.
A little hint of chocolate.
And lactose.
Yeah, and you get
a little bit of lactose.
I get some hops too.
Hops, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's still like some hop leaves floating around in there, which will probably settle out in the fermenter over the next few days. But yeah, I'm stoked.
Yeah,
good brew day. Everything measured out the way I needed it to. I always love having a little extra in there, only because I know I lose some during fermentation. So yeah, at this point, it's just a waiting game. We'll see you guys in 7 to 10 days. Cheers. What's up, everyone? Welcome back. It's been about 2 weeks since we started fermentation, and today we're moving 4 ounces of cocoa nibs and a pound of toasted coconut in with the beer in secondary fermentation. That's what we're doing today. Here we go. All right, so as you can see, we have the racking cane inside the primary. We're gonna use this to funnel the beer into this secondary fermenter, which has got the toasted coconut and the cocoa nibs. I've sanitized everything. I sanitized the coconut, cocoa nibs, the bag, the hose, everything. Everything's sanitized. It's ready to go. So here we go. As you can see, the beer's just in there, filling up right on top of the cocoa nibs and the coconut. Last time I brewed with coconut, I had a real problem with these shavings. I'm hoping that this bag is fine enough to keep some of those cocoa shavings out, because they were a pain in the butt when it finally came time to bottle. Well guys, there she is in all her glory. We have moved everything in secondary. You can see some cocoa nibs floating and then that giant bag of coconut shavings. I put a marble in that bag. Hopefully it'll weigh it down. Looks like maybe one marble wasn't enough. I guess we'll see. Alright guys, so our beer's now completely in secondary. Airlock's on. It's time to sit in this one for, I'm thinking I'm going to give it about 2 weeks so those cocoa nibs can really soak up in the beer. But the real test is to see how far we've come along. So here is some of the beer that I pulled off primary. Let's give it a taste. Oh. You get some beautiful roasted malts off this. You actually get quite a surprising amount of chocolate as well, rich dark chocolate. Really, really good. The coconut that we added during the boil, I'm not getting a ton of it. It's there, but very subtle. So hopefully these coconut shavings really pick that up a bit. And then that lactose is creating just a soft, silky mouthfeel. This beer is going to be incredible. I cannot wait. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Well guys, it's kegging day. It is time to move this chocolate coconut milk stout into our keg, hook it up to my kegerator, and start the carbing process. This is one of my favorite parts of brewing now because I'm not bottling beer. Bottling beer is a frickin' nightmare. If you want to see that process, you can look at some of my older homebrew videos, but this time we're just filling it up in a keg. It's really simple. I'm not adding anything else. I'm literally just transferring it. So here we go. Well, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we have started transferring from secondary down into this torpedo keg here. We have a little over 5 gallons, so I might have a little left over. I don't know if I'll be able to fit it in there, but you know what, I'm okay with that. I'll probably be pulling some off so I can measure gravity and taste, you know, see what it tastes like. You can see the coconut shavings bag in there. There's probably some cocoa nibs floating around too. The last time I messed with coconut, I got it all up in this siphon hose. It was an absolute nightmare. So I'm hoping using this grain bag is really going to help it out a lot. I guess we won't know until we have a little bit of a jam, a little traffic jam in this thing. But so far so good, man. That looks beautiful. The color looks amazing. I am really excited. Alright guys, well, everything was sanitized. The beer was moved from the fermenter into the sanitized keg, and now I'm just putting some pressure on it in my kegerator. I'm going to give it about 10 days to carb up because I'm doing it at a very low pressure because I already have something else on tap that's running from the same tank. And in about 10 days, we'll tap it, try it, and tell you what we think. See you in 10 days. Well, hey guys, welcome back. It's been, probably about a month and a half since brew day on this beer, but it is ready, it is carbonated, and it's asking for us to drink it. I'm here with Jacob. You guys know him. So yeah, we're gonna give it a try and tell you what we think. You ready?
Oh yeah.
Cheers.
Woo, that is chocolate.
Yeah. That's a lot of chocolate.
I mean, it looks like a damn milkshake.
Yeah, you guys probably can't see it up, from this distance. But wow, the head is like frothy. It's like you go to Starbucks and you order like the cream on top.
Yeah.
Right? It's got like that cream looking texture to it. You ready to try some?
I did.
Oh, good. Well, tell them what you think.
Yeah, so, this is a bit of an older beer. So those of you who are new to craft beer, maybe you haven't seen it. I don't know how, like, widely they still are, like, popular. But Boulder Beer Company, Chocolate Shake, was like a really solid chocolate stout, or porter? Not even chocolate porter. That was one of those like recommended beers you should try if you like chocolate and like porters. I still like that beer. Oh, I got...
It's getting choked up, man.
The beer is so emotional. No, I still like that beer, Shake Chocolate Porter. Pretty sure it's Boulder Beer Company from Colorado. Really solid. This kind of reminds me of like that realm of beer, of like chocolate beer. There's a couple other things that it's reminding me of, almost like something from Modern Times. I can't remember like the specific one because they do so many.
Yeah.
Not the coffee stout, which is like Black House, which is very good, but this isn't coffee. This is definitely chocolate.
Yes.
Yeah, really good though, man.
Yeah, I'm so happy with this beer. Now, one thing I want to point out, we literally just poured this fresh from the tap. And obviously I've tried this before we did this. Jacob has not. This is his first time. One thing that I notice is as soon as I pour it fresh, you get a ton of that chocolate flavor. Like that show chocolate that I used is phenomenal though. I've used cocoa nibs in my beer before, but none have really gotten that kind of flavor out of it before. Show chocolate from NorCal, you guys should look them up if you're a home brewer. I would consider brewing with their chocolate. I mean, you guys saw I added, I think like 8 ounces worth of just like chocolate bar in the boil, and then I added an additional 4 ounces of cocoa nibs in secondary. So I intended this to be a very chocolatey beer, but it's not only chocolatey, it's the quality of the chocolate that tastes really, really good in this. The only thing I have to say against this beer, and it's really not like a negative thing, it's just kind of interesting, which we're going to experiment with in a few minutes, is I added 2 pounds of toasted coconut in here. You do get a little off the aroma, you do get a little bit off the flavor itself, but not nearly as much as the chocolate. Ice cold, this thing is a chocolate stout. Chocolate milk stout. I mean, and that's the other thing too. The lactose that I brewed with, first time brewing with lactose, that actually worked out really well. Damn, what a sweet beer. I mean, sweet, smooth, creamy. I couldn't ask for more. But yeah, that coconut, it doesn't really come out when it's ice cold. However, I already tried this. You let the heat get to this a little bit, and in a few minutes when that heat gets to it, the coconut really comes out. Which initially I was a little disappointed in because, I don't know, this is kind of a beer I could chug, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah, I was actually going to say that.
Yeah, it's super drinkable. I mean, it finished out at, I think, 5.9%.
Nice.
And it's just thick and just easy to drink, and despite the beautiful head on it, it doesn't feel super carbonated on your tongue. But anyways, I actually kind of like the fact that the coconut comes out later. Because then I sit there and I think, if this is something where I have friends over and we're all sitting and drinking and they're enjoying my beer, maybe I could chug it, but maybe somebody else is going to take their time with it. Most people take their time with their beer, not me so much. And as that time goes on, it's going to add more complexity and more detail to this beer, and it's going to basically blossom, which, you know, some of my favorite beers, that's exactly what they do. They taste one way at the beginning and one way at the end, and you kind of get like a little like rainbow of flavors a little bit. So yeah, I want to do that right now, and we'll come back in a few minutes once these have heated up, and we'll tell you what we think. All right, so we're back. It's only been a few minutes. I came up with the idea of putting some of this beer into a taster glass. I figure it's gonna warm up a lot faster just because there's less of it. And then these glasses have been sitting here for about 5 minutes or so as well. I poured myself a little extra just because, yeah.
Because he's extra.
Yes, because I'm super extra. So, Jacob, you want to go ahead and try it now?
Yeah. Also, yeah, just the head retention and the head on this beer is really nice to look at.
It's pretty. It's got that beautiful khaki color, just creamy.
Ooh. It always gets me.
Oh, yep, there it is.
How smooth it is. How creamy and rich and. I mean, I don't know. It's winter. I'm in full-blown stout mode right now. I want creamy chocolate in my mouth, and that's
Boom.
right there. You did it. You brewed this at the perfect time.
Thank God.
Mm-hmm.
What I will point out when it comes to the coconut, it really does come out as it warms up. You get a lot more. I toasted the coconut. I assumed I was going to get like a roasty, toasty coconut flavor, and surprisingly, it's not. In fact, a friend of mine who I've already shared this beer with described it as kind of scraping the meat out of a fresh coconut, and just the flavor of that meat that's been sitting in the coconut milk is just raw. It's got that pure coconut flavor. It's damn good. I assumed that the head retention was going to suck on this beer because I had a lot of chocolate and a lot of coconut, and still the head retention is quite impressive. But the beer itself is just dynamite, man. I friggin' love this beer.
You know, I think it gets creamier as it warms up.
Yeah, it kind of does.
Yeah. I'm just comparing like the two glasses. That one's definitely a little bit colder than this one for sure. Yeah, I feel like that little taster is creamier.
It's like that coconut cream comes out. It's almost like coconut milk, or like if you guys have bought like the canned coconut milk before, that's kind of what it reminds me of. Like if you make Thai food or something like that, like a curry dish, use coconut milk, that's kind of what it reminds me of.
But like if you use that to make hot chocolate. Which now I'm really curious about.
Yeah.
I would be really curious to try it just with no coconut at all and see how much that really affects it.
That'd be fun to play with next
If I get more chocolate, or if it changes the way I taste the chocolate. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of the fun thing about homebrew, right? Is you make a beer once, and then you kind of just can pull out single
tweak
ingredients.
it and play with it,
and just see how much it changes the beer, and that's the fun part of brewing.
Hell, I could even do this again, and instead of coconut, use blueberries.
Ooh.
Ideas.
Yeah, you can go a lot of places with this. This is like a solid base in which to just mess with ingredients with. Good fucking job.
Thank you very much. I had help from friends.
Good.
Yes. So yeah, that's gonna do it, guys. That is our review from grain to glass of Captain Phasma's chocolate coconut milk stout. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're a home brewer, I hope you learned something valuable that can help you with your next brew. If you're a home brewer and you have any insight or tips or things I could do differently, I would love to hear them. Always looking at perfecting my skills. So yeah, it's totally welcome. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you give us a thumbs up. Click the bell to get alerts every time a new episode comes out. Subscribe, obviously. And please share with your friends. I mean, if your friends like beer, this is a channel for them, right?
Wow.
It's strictly about beer. So, I mean, you can't ask for too much more. So with that being said, I'm Jeff.
And I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you again on Let's Have Some Beer. Cheers.